The Village Schoolmaster by Oliver Twist, Part 2. So, students, I have told you about what the poem is going to speak about. That is, the poem is going to give a word picture of the village schoolmaster. It will tell us about, give us a description, a small description of the school and how the students perceived the schoolmaster and how the villagers respected the schoolmaster for his knowledge. Now we shall go to the next 5 lines. I have already explained the first 5 lines in the previous video. So we will go to the next 5 lines that begins from I knew him well, and every truant knew. Well had the boding tremblers learned to trace the day's disasters in his morning face. Full well they laughed with counterfeited glee at all his jokes, for many a joke had he. I knew him well, just as I knew him, because I've already told you this teacher that Goldsmith is talking about was also his teacher when he was 6 years old and studying in that small school. Not only the poet, but every truant refers to these students who do not attend the class, without any good reason. They bunk the classes. So these children are called truants. So every truant, every child in the class, the good student or the child who skipped the class, the child who was not interested in studies, they all knew. Well had the boding tremblers learned to trace. Well had the boding tremblers. Boding tremblers. Tremble is to be frightened. Boding tremblers knew that frightened students, the anxious students, they were frightened because they had not attended the class. And these boding tremblers, they knew what was going. Boding, they could foresee how they would be punished by the teacher. They could see that the teacher was angry with them for not attending the classes or learning their lessons. They had learned to trace. They had learned to read his expression and say that their morning or their day was going to be difficult. They knew that the teacher was going to punish them or scold them for not doing their work or for skipping the classes. So they knew that the whole day was going to be a disaster for them. How? Just by looking at the face of the schoolmaster. They could read his expression and they were frightened of him. Full well they laughed with counterfeited glee. What is counterfeit? Fake. You have heard about counterfeit money, fake money. Okay. So here their laughter. They laughed with counterfeited glee. They laughed just to please him. to make him happy. At what did they laugh? They laughed at his jokes. For many jokes had he, the schoolmaster, used to tell a lot of jokes. Many of the jokes maybe were repeated or the jokes were not funny, but still the students laughed aloud just to please the schoolmaster, because they wanted to make him happy. Okay, this is very ironical. He praises the schoolmaster for his vast knowledge, for all that he says, but at the same time, even the children know that his jokes are not funny. The children are fooling the schoolmaster just by laughing at his jokes that are not funny. Okay, and a little bit of irony here. I repeat the summary. Every child in the class, in the school, could read the expression on the schoolmaster's face, especially those children who did not attend the classes regularly. When they saw the anger on the schoolmaster's face, they could read the expressions on the schoolmaster's face very easily. They were anxious. They were fearful of him. Okay, because they knew that they were going to be punished. So they knew that their day ahead was going to be very difficult when in the morning itself, when they saw the teacher's face. But the teacher was also kind at the same time. He loved to make his children laugh, and that is why he used to crack a lot of jokes. And many of his jokes were not funny. The students would laugh at his jokes, though they were not funny, in order to please the teacher. So this is a little sarcastic or ironical, because we all believe that the teacher was highly educated. He had a lot of knowledge, and at the same time the children are able to see through the teacher's jokes. Let's go to the next paragraph. Full well the busy whisper circling around conveyed the dismal tidings when he frowned. Yet he was kind, or if severe in aught, the love he bore to learning was in fault. The village all declared how much he knew. Whenever the children saw him frowning, they were concerned and they started whispering. The whispers began, something is wrong, the teacher is angry, the teacher is worried, the teacher is going to punish us. Okay, and everybody started talking about it. Why, what is the teacher going to do next? They were all worried. And though he had a face which was showing his anger, which was a frown on his face, still the poem emphasizes that he was a kind man. Though he had an angry countenance, a grim face, an angry face, a frown on his face, a disapproval on his face, still in his heart he was a kind man. The poet says, though he was severe, though he was stern, it was only because he was concerned about their students. He wanted the students to learn, and His love for learning made him a strict teacher. Why was he strict? He was strict because he wanted the students to study their lessons. He wanted the students to learn discipline. And so the poet says, though he was strict, he was kind. Why was he strict? Because he wanted the children to learn. He wanted the children to be good at their studies. He wanted the children to learn discipline. The village all declared how much he knew. The whole village was in awe of the schoolmaster. They all admired the knowledge of the schoolmaster. The village all declared how much he knew. So what did he know about? What did he teach the villagers? What did he teach the students? Or what was his knowledge all about? Why were they impressed with the schoolmaster? It was certain he could write and cipher too. Lands he could measure, terms and tides presage. And even the story ran that he could gauge in arguing too. The parson owned his skill, for even though vanquished, he could argue still. The villagers were impressed by the knowledge of the schoolmaster because he could read and cipher too. He could write. Lands he could measure. He could decode whatever was written, that is reading and writing. He could decode. He could measure land. And terms and tides presage. He could predict the weather, the tides. He could tell the dates of religious festivals, terms. When Easter would come, he could tell the date of different festivals. And that is why the villagers were impressed with all these skills of the schoolmaster. And even the story ran that he could gauge, he could measure, gauging is measure the contents of the vessel, the liquid filled in the vessels. He could measure them, he could gauge. So, the schoolmaster was admired by the villagers because he could read and write, he could decode, he could measure land, he could predict the tides, he could predict the dates, he could tell about the festivals that were in the offing, he could measure the contents of the vessels. And the school teacher they were amazed at his arguing skills, at his debating skills. With whom would he argue? He would argue with the parson, the priest, the clergy of the church. Okay, parson is the clergy or the priest of the church. He could argue even with the priest, so they were amazed at his art of rhetoric, at his debating skills, and he could continue to argue even after being defeated. Again, it is ironic. He was defeated by the clergy in his argument, which says that he did not know everything, but in order to show his skill, even after being defeated, he would continue to argue. For even though vanquished, defeated in the argument, he would go on and on. And that is why even the priest, everyone in the village admired him too. He was admired by everyone in the village. Okay, so the whole village was impressed by the knowledge of the schoolmaster. They admired him because he could read, write, decode, measure land, predict tides, dates of festivals. He could measure the contents of the vessels. The people were amazed at his debating skills because he was even able to carry on an argument even after being defeated, and that is why he was admired by everyone in the village. He amazed the gazing rustics ranged around, and still they gazed, and still the wonder grew that one small head could carry all he knew. But past all this fame, the spot where many a time he triumphed is forgot. The schoolmaster had amazing vocabulary, while words of learned length and thundering sound. I have missed out on these lines, students, in the slide. So while words of learned length and thundering sound, he had an impressive vocabulary. Words of learned length, that is Latin, refers to Latin language. He had a very good vocabulary, and that is why the rustics, the simple villagers, gathered around him. They gazed at his strong expression, and this knowledge of the schoolmaster inspired in his students respect and seriousness to study their lessons. And that is why the rustics, they gazed at him. Amazed, the gazing rustics ranged around. They were standing around with open mouths, gazing at him. And they were wondering, they marveled, how one person can know so much, how one small head could carry all he knew. But what has happened with the passage of time? This is all in the past. The schoolmaster's name is forgotten. The school does not exist anymore. And the very spot where the schoolmaster became famous does not exist. The fame of the schoolmaster is forgotten. The school is forgotten. It is abandoned. There is no one going to that school now because the children, the rustics, all have migrated to the cities. No one wants to live in the village anymore. So he's painting a sad picture about a village about a school which has been abandoned but once were a great master, schoolmaster, who had great knowledge, who was interested in teaching his students, who was interested in the future of his students, does not live there anymore. So students, a poem gives us a word picture of the schoolmaster, and as I've already told you at the beginning, you can prepare notes based on the points and given below every paragraph. So the question, as I've already told you, is write a character sketch of the village schoolmaster. Thank you, students.